You may have heard in the news that there is a hīkoi, a protest march left Cape Reinga, is heading towards Wellington in the great tradition of hīkois of the past, protesting, of course, against the Treaty Principles Bill, which has been tabled by David Seymour. This is something we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks, in particular, not so much the bill, but the principles of Te Tiriti. We've got some panel discussions coming up, which I'm looking forward to. But today, wanting to focus on the Declaration of Independence, joining us on the program now is Reverend Dr. Malcolm Falloon. He is a member of the team at the New Zealand Christian Network and also New Zealand Christian history historian. Malcolm, kia ora, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
When it comes to the Declaration of Independence, now some of the flags that are flying on the Harbour Bridge, even as we speak, or they may be on the southern side of the bridge by now, but there's a flag which is associated with the Declaration of Independence. And there's some people who say, well, the Declaration of Independence is more important than Te Tiriti. We'll get to some of that in a moment, but firstly, tell us about the Declaration of Independence and the flag that represents it.
Well, it's in 1835, October 28, 1835. There's a declaration that's made. It's been initiated by James Busby, and he gathered 34 chiefs, I think it was at the time. It was signed by a number of others a little bit later. And it was really declaring the United Tribes of New Zealand to be an independent, sovereign state.
Yep.
But it was preceded a year before by the choosing of a maritime flag. About another 30 chiefs gathered, because in 1830, a few years beforehand, trouble was caused because two Maori chiefs had built a boat. So Pata One and Tau Nui had built a boat in the Hokianga, the Sir George Murray, and they sailed it to Sydney to trade, and they didn't have a maritime flag, and so they actually had a traditional woven mat that they flew, but it wasn't recognised by the New South Wales government, so they impounded the boat and actually sold it. So the issue became how to have a recognisable maritime flag. And the CMS, under Henry Williams, he was a Navy man. He had designed a flag for the CMS. And so these gathered in 1834, a year before this Declaration of Independence. Busby gathered 30 or so chiefs, and they had a choice of three flags designed by Henry Williams. And by a narrow margin, they chose the CMS flag. So that by 12 votes to 10 to 6. And with 2 abstentions. And so that became, it's called Takara. So it's a very important flag. It meant that New Zealand built ships could sail and not be impounded and such like. And James Busby called it at the time, the selecting of the flag, the first national act of the New Zealand chiefs.
Wow.
Now, this is James Busby being a little bit ambitious. Because it was simply those chiefs in the Bay of Islands at the time, and but still a significant act. It was the official flag until 1840, which was replaced by the Union Jack. The New Zealand Company started adopting this flag as their own flag, and Hobson saw that this is actually in danger of creating independence of the New Zealand Company under. From the colonial government and from him as governor. So he went and took down these flags and put up Union Jacks. So the irony is now the flag is asserting an independence maybe or a greater level of independence for Maori sovereignty.
Certainly, thank you so much for the background of that. And now, for a lot of people now, they associate this flag very much with Declaration of Independence and a declaration of sovereignty of the chiefs at the time. But I mean, there's a fascinating story which I'd like to get into here of how that operated, because there's this period of time between the Declaration of Independence and before Te Tiriti, where I suppose this was put to the test. Under the Declaration of Independence, could there be an understanding between the chiefs of what a rule of law looks like, and a particular dispute that Busby was involved with again?
Yeah. Well, so there were a few months after the signing of this Declaration of Independence, He Whakaputanga, there was a land dispute between Māori at Rangiahoa, the northern entrance to the Bay of Islands, and the Kawakawa, and they were gathered at Waitangi to solve the dispute. But unfortunately, fighting broke out. 2 people were killed from the Kawakawa side, and 2 were severely wounded. And the reason is because the Kawakawa was a centre of Maori Christianity at that time, was just emerging. And Rangiahoa Maori were to become Christians, but they weren't yet. They had come, the Maori Christians operating under Christian tikanga, under the law of Christ, came without weapons.
Yep.
A non-traditional thing to do. 150 of them. The 30 or so Maori from Rangiahoa, not being Christians, they knew they weren't to bring their guns, but they hid them in bushes.
Wow.
When the speaking got acrimonious, they went to their guns and opened fire on the Christian Maori. And it really highlights the difficulty that the Declaration of Independence was facing. That and I would maintain that the Treaty of Waitangi was necessary for Maori as much as it was for Pākehā, the European and controlling the European settlers who are coming. And now that's an ongoing discussion. But the reason I think it is because when you have a tradition of law under tikanga Māori, it was quite a complicated, sophisticated law, but it required the use of force and enforcement. If you have given up the right of revenge through knowing that vengeance is mine, says the Lord, we look to God to be the judge, and you forgive your enemies, that's a different system of law, and actually the two are like oil and water.
Yeah, yeah. And
I think the Treaty of Waitangi is trying to solve that issue. And now how we work out things in the present day, that's open for discussion. But I think that sometimes we're naive about what was happening in the 1835, 1836, that pre-treaty period.
I think that is such an important point because, I mean, this is an example of a conflict arising from having 2 different tikanga, 2 different understandings of what the system of law was, and, of course, 2 different understandings of faith and the conflict that this drew. And I think also looking at the supposed unity between rangatira, that this sovereignty that this flag and the Declaration of Independence represented wasn't necessarily a unity that could be practically enforced or upheld at the time.
Yeah, there is. We do have to recognise there was a unity under tikanga Māori.
Yeah.
But it's whether it could step up and become a united tribes and operate as a sovereign state. Now, maybe over time it could have done, but actually had a number of weaknesses. One is that the civil war broke out in the Bay of Islands, and they actually never met until the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi. But a number of other issues. I think but on the one hand, Māori did have a system of checks and balances and of talking together, and there were some issues which that Māori chiefs were addressing both to New South Wales and to England about the conduct of people, like what was Captain Stewart of the Elizabeth and the involvement down in Rangi at Akaroa. So they were meeting. But we can't be idealistic about actually what was declared that time. There was aspirations, but actually I think it evolved and emerged and was superseded by the Treaty of Waitangi, and probably needed to be.
And hey, a lesson learned for today's situation: if we are approaching a conversation with 2 different understandings of law, 2 different tikanga, we're going to end up at best talking past each other in this regard. Malcolm, thank you for your insight. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.